amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome. It's terrific to be with you all in the new year, and I hope it's proving to be a good year so far for you all. My guest today is Anna Battle. Anna is a popular artist, illustrator and author, known for her colourful flowers, tablescapes and online classes. Her mission in life is to share the joy of drawing and painting through both original art and teaching art. In 2011, she opened her first art studio and published her first online class in 2015 called Shiny Happy Art. She has written a book, Painting Party, A Beginner's Guide to Acrylics. When it comes to art, Anna is all about learning by doing, sharing the joy and filling the book. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. It's lovely to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So, when you came home that very first time from preschool, as little children do, and carried in your painting and said, "Mum, Mum, Mum, look, look," did she realise, do you think then, that you were an artist?
Oh, look, I grew up surrounded by art because, as you know, my mother is an artist and my mum's dad was a professional photographer.
Yes,
I think Mum really learnt so much about art by colouring photographs, actually, when she was young. But I think it was way before preschool, actually, because I can remember Mum setting me up with a bucket of water in our cement driveway, and I was given a brush and I'd just draw with water on the cement driveway all the way down the driveway. And, of course, by the time you finished, it's dried at the top again and I'd be sent back up the top to draw my way down again. And I can also remember just drawing on newsprint at home, sort of with felt pens. I don't know where the paper was, but we were just given newspaper to draw on. And I know that Mum still has a couple of those. But I think I've just always drawn, which is wonderful. I think it's a good way of understanding the world. And obviously Mum encouraged that.
Absolutely. Anna's mother is Di Battle, also a brilliant artist, and I must admit here a connection because Di was bridesmaid to my husband and I, or to me I suppose, when I married Rob in Papua New Guinea back in 1966. And actually Anna has just reminded me that one of the wedding photos that we had, of course, was artificially coloured, which it was at that stage, and we sent it back down to Australia, and Di's father, yes, actually coloured it in, and I've still got that photograph set up in our living room at home.
I think it teaches a very delicate hand, I think, so and brush control. So she would have learnt stacks doing that. It's a wonderful way to start.
Absolutely. So tell me now, how old were you when you realised you could possibly paint well enough to make it a commercial venture?
Well, I think like most people, when I finished school in the late 80s, and art was definitely not considered a viable option. I can remember Dad saying, look, you're never going to make a living through art. You better think of something else. And that wouldn't have been an unusual thing for dads to say to daughters who were a bit keen on art. I did top art at school, so I've always been quite involved with it. And the school that I was at, Downlands College in Toowoomba, started a big art show back in 1987 as I was finishing in Year 12. So I was always connected sort of beyond school by putting things in that art show because I knew they'd be accepted back then, which was great. But so I went to uni to do accounting, actually, accounting and then marketing. And look, it's not a bad thing to learn a bit of business, especially as an artist that I am now. I'm very grateful for that business training. But it probably wasn't until I had kids, and my eldest, is 1996. So I did as much sketching as I could then, just fitting things in and doing things with the kids, and it gets you more creative all over again. But it's recently, I think it was 2015 that I actually left a full-time job thinking, no, I can make this work.
Right.
And it was a big step, but it just had to happen. I was definitely born for this. I think everything's been leading towards doing art full-time.
And it was in 2015, I think we've said that you actually set up Shiny Happy Art. Yeah. And I must tell you, dear listeners, that Anna's Shiny Happy Art online is really the most fantastic, not only just full of colour, but full of ideas. And even if you can't paint, like I can't paint, you sort of have a feeling that perhaps you might be able to.
You might want to.
Yes.
Look, I have always encouraged people to find a way because I think as I've said, it's a really great way of interpreting the world and figuring things out. So it was, and Shiny Happy Art actually came to pass in about 2003. I can remember sitting watching Sesame Street with James, who's my eldest, and REM came on and did Very Happy Monsters, they sang, instead of Shiny Happy People, with all of the characters from Sesame Street. And I can remember watching this Very Happy Monsters thinking, Shiny Happy Art, that's what I want to do. And that's when I sort of got the domain name and the business name all sorted back in 2004. So that's when I was home with kids, and I was painting a bit, and I actually ended up thinking, oh, I like this painting, but I don't really want to hang it on my wall, and I made it into a handbag.
Oh, right.
So I started with hand-painted handbags, and a few people saw them and thought these might sell, so I ended up going to markets with them, and it was a slow burn, but for quite a few years there I made handbags covered in plastic, that plastic inside, plastic outside, and I got very fast at painting, I suppose, and pretty good at sewing. Right. Because it was definitely a home-based business, and that quick painting led to being able to teach painting to beginners, I suppose. I was able to break it down really well to say this is what we'd start with and this is how we'd go with it. So one thing has led to another through my whole career, but those hand-painted handbags at the markets are still what I'm known for by a lot of people in Toowoomba, and I do still see them occasionally walking around.
Oh, really?
Walking around town, or people will meet me and go, I've still got your handbag, and which is lovely to hear.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yes.
Actually, Anna, I have to tell you, listeners, is wearing the most beautiful, brightly coloured dress, and when I first saw her this morning, I said, wow, did you paint that? And she said, no, but I wouldn't mind. She wished she had, and wouldn't mind that you did it. You actually, now going back to Dar, you actually recently, up in Toowoomba, held a joint exhibition called Family Ties, and I gather it was a huge success, and you must have loved doing that with your mum, did you? Yes.
We've done a few exhibitions together, actually. As an artist, to do a solo exhibition is a massive job.
Yes.
A huge responsibility. It's much more fun to do it with somebody else, and doing it with mum is wonderful because she knows how to do everything.
Yeah.
And she'll take over the hanging and man it as well, which was great because I had other things with kids and such. So it might have been about our 5th exhibition together.
Right.
And it's amazing the magic that happens when you put together a body of work, but then get it together in one room and think, I hope this is going to go together. And it does. It really does. So we've been really lucky that even though we have different styles, the colours have worked. And she's a good people person as well. So the people coming through just make your day. And she sold nearly all of her work in that exhibition. And she just keeps kicking goals, really. She does it because she has to, the painting, and I think a lot of people appreciate it. And
she does.
I certainly do.
Beautiful art. But it was actually Di who told me, interestingly now to our listeners, is that she watched a couple come into this exhibition, 2 women actually, and they stood in front of one of her paintings for a long, long time, and she could hear one of the women explaining the painting to the other. So she walked over, and she actually discovered that one of the women looking at the painting was completely blind, and that the lady beside her was explaining the painting to her in great detail. Now, Di said to me, she said, I think that woman, who was sight impaired, got more out of that painting than lots of people with full sight that had walked past it or stopped briefly to have a look at it. It was incredible, she said. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. I think just being able to take the time, and most people, it's almost overwhelming. There's so much to look at in an art exhibition, but to be able to, as an artist, that's what we're trying to do, to get you to stop. So that first woman had to choose that painting to explain. Yes. So it obviously had something going for it at that point. But then, to take the time. And with mum's paintings, and I try it with my own, there's a lot to find in there so that you're not just seeing everything at once. Yes. You can walk past it the third time and find something surprising sort of hidden in it.
Yes.
We really have, for many years, we've talked about to try and get someone to stop for even 30 seconds.
Right.
You've won. You've achieved something as an artist, because it's so easy for people just to walk by.
Exactly, yes. But no, that really brought home to me what enjoyment people, whether you have got full sight or whether you're sight impaired or blind, that you can actually get out of the arts. And actually, I had no idea that sight impaired people could paint until I read about an artist called John Bramlett, Bramlit, in Texas. Now, he paints by raising lines on the surface of a canvas and altering the consistency of paint so he can feel the colours. He's worked with internationally acclaimed museums like the Guggenheim and Metropolitan Museum of Art and runs popular workshops that teach people to see the world as he does and paint using their senses and imagination. He says, "I've drawn since I was really little, but I never painted until I lost my sight because I didn't think I'd be good. But here I was without my sight and my brain was filling up with images and I couldn't get them out. And I didn't think I'd be able to do art again." So that was a really interesting article, I thought. We talked a little bit about that earlier on, but can you sort of add to that at all?
You know, I
Anna?
think I might have seen a documentary about him years
right.
ago. It's coming back to me now. And he'd have someone set him up in a big studio space with his paints and off he'd go and create amazing things. I think if it's in you to be creative, the simple act of putting a pencil to paper is so calming in many ways. And we've been doing it all of our lives in some way or the other, whether you're just scratching a note or if you can remember being at school, we've been expected to do this simple thing. And then as soon as, even it's interesting, he said there, I didn't think I'd be any good. As soon as we think we're not going to be good at it, we stop. And it's such a shame. It's so unnecessary because the piece is still there. And I think there are people out there now, like pub choir, for example, just getting people to sing.
Yes.
And you know how good it is.
Yes.
It feels so good to sing, even if you're no good. We sing in the shower when we don't have judgment, but you know it makes you feel good.
Yes.
Singing alongside someone in a choir makes you feel good.
Yes.
Look, drawing and noticing, I think the real gift with drawing is to take the time to notice what's happening in front of you,
Right.
whether it's something up close or far away.
Yes.
And even I have found myself, I was very lucky to be invited to see a symphony orchestra years ago now. And I wouldn't say I'm a music person. I can sing along in the car, but it was my first time listening to an orchestra and really I got it that time. But I had a notebook on my lap and I just made lines because there are people who will paint music, I suppose, as well. Synthesia. I've got the word wrong there. But I just made rows and rows. I filled this little sketchbook up with rows and rows of lines. And I feel like I experienced the music more by engaging my hands as well. So I would encourage anyone to say, like, have a go. If it feels good, do it. Draw around your hand. If you can't see well, what can you feel? All these years ago when we were little kids doing rubbings on the footpath or rubbings on a leaf and seeing the patterns and noticing what's there. I think I saw another thing just on Instagram the other day. They were making patterns off anything they could make patterns off, putting paint onto the bottom of a bowl and then putting fabric on that and taking a print off it. Years ago, we were in England and they do all those rubbings on the stones at the cathedrals or on the gravestones. So there's ways of involving texture with art. The act of doing it is so much more important than the act of being good at it.
Exactly.
Or thinking that we have to sell it. Like I will happily sing along not thinking I have to make a record and be an amazing singer and I'll still get that joy out of it. I'd love people to think of art the same way. If you're going to get some joy out of making it, making whatever item it is, or I like sketching out my recipes, actually, a simple recipe to explain to kids how to make it. I often read a recipe and think this doesn't actually make logical sense, this order. This is the way I would do it. And so I've done illustrated recipes quite often and I used to publish them on my website and I had some people downloading them and giving them to their kids as they left home because they could understand an illustrated recipe. And I tell you, if your grandmother had done an illustrated recipe about how she made, and this is what we do in our family, rumbles, you would not be judging the quality of her artwork.
No.
You'd just be going, my goodness, my grandmother drew this. How wonderful it is that she touched this piece of paper, So if we could take a step away from the good and just think, this makes my life better, richer. I want to communicate in this way. Just do it.
Exactly.
We're not being marked anymore. It's a shame.
But Anna, just going back to, talking about that and John Bamplet, am I right in thinking that oils would be better? You'd feel the texture more in oils than you would in watercolours? No?
Well, watercolours, I have seen people finger paint with watercolours, actually, and so you could actually have a go. But I would say acrylics, because they're probably a little less toxic. But then they dry faster, so that's a downside there. Oils, obviously some oils have a huge smell to them.
Yes.
I don't use oils myself, but I know that a lot of people who use oil will use gloves
Yes.
when they're using that, which would be harder to feel the texture.
Of
but
course, yes.
With all of these paints now, there's so many mediums that can be used to add to paint that anything's possible with either.
Yes.
So with acrylic paint, for example, I like using fluid paints, which are the consistency of runny cream. But those same paints come in a high flow formula,
Right.
which is almost like ink. And they also come in heavy body paints, which is like toothpaste. And it's the same pigment, just in a different carrier.
Right.
So I'm imagining that this fellow might have some sort of sandy additive perhaps to certain colours so that he can figure out which is which.
Yes.
That's sort of what was coming to mind for me
Right.
there.
Yeah.
There's an amazing woman in New York who does finger paint with oils and builds up incredible texture. It's almost like impressionism,
Right.
I suppose. But
Yes.
I wanted, when you were talking about, though, with being vision impaired, the artists that we know so well, like Monet,
Yes.
as he aged, of course, his sight declined. And
Yes.
so his water lilies
Yes.
closer to the end of his life are much looser and very impressionistic compared to some of the ones earlier on because his eyesight was declining. And the colours of his work changed as well because it was a bit more yellow, the way he could see things.
Actually, I read that and then went and looked at some of the prints of his paintings, yes.
So he sort of just went with it.
Yes.
So I say that often to people who come to my classes, and for years I did face-to-face classes as paint and sip style paint-alongs, and people would come with tremors or they'd come with other issues. Some people just couldn't concentrate. They'd come with people who were just flighty.
Yes.
And so they had to paint quickly and fast.
Right.
And other people are more scratchy. Like everyone's got their own hand.
Yes.
So some people are bold and thick with their paint and other people are delicate and,
Yes.
and light. And I'm just thinking, well, if that's your hand,
Yes.
go with it. Tremble all over or
Yes.
tremor all over the painting and you've got a style.
Yes.
Be scratchy all over the painting and you've got a style. Be bold.
Exactly.
And, what do you feel like
Yes.
doing? I look at the sketches of Matisse
Yes.
and they are bold lines, and then you
Yeah.
can see the delicate paintings and sketches of Rodin. These amazing artists had their own hand as well. What would your hand be?
Exactly.
I think that's quite interesting. And you've got an idea of it with your own handwriting, of course,
Yes.
how you would approach it. But yes, just say, I'm going to do a bold painting if you think that's
Yes.
your thing, or a bold sketch,
Yeah.
and put something in front of you, whether you're feeling it and then putting it down on the paper or what you can see of it. It's your unique take on the world, which is exciting, really.
And it is, as Anna says, it's totally your unique take. But just going back to Monet and whatever, because Anna does the most wonderful sketchbooks. And I was lucky enough to go into her studio not long ago, and she's got a bookcase full of them. And they, I have to say, absolutely beautiful, full of colour. And my immediate reaction, I don't know why, was Monet. For some of the colours and whatever you have. So when did you start sort of doing those sketchbooks, and will we ever see them out there in the
in
domain?
the world? My deliberate sketchbook practice probably started 1st of January 2017. I remember that day thinking, I am still drawing the way that I did when I was at school, so can I get better at this? I'm going to try and draw everyday-ish. And that is certainly something I talk about a lot with the way I teach. Every day is almost too demanding and you don't need extra pressure in your life. Everyday-ish is just fine because, once again, we're not being marked.
No.
So I started that day and I can remember sitting down thinking, oh, God, what am I going to draw? And I ended up drawing an empty jar of chocolate peanuts, I think, that we all have at Christmas time, an empty bottle of that and like a fork or something else that was a serviette that was sitting on the table. It's a pretty ordinary subject, drawing, but it got me started. And then once you start, you're actually looking for things to draw.
Right.
So I filled that first sketchbook and it was only a A5 size, sort of 30 pages, quite thick paper, so it wasn't a 1,000-page sketchbook or anything. And it felt good, so I started another and I just kept going. So this was probably a $15 sketchbook. No, really,
They're not that big.
as you're starting,
They're
yes,
gorgeous, absolutely
you
gorgeous.
you don't want to start with things that are too precious. And a lot of people have that pressure of that, or they worry about sort of starting a blank page or staring at a blank page. And so sometimes I'd start in the middle. And I'm not very good at the chronological order thing either. Once again, just less rules.
Yes.
So I'll date my pages so I can see the improvement, but I don't need to do them all in order. I've met people who are much more organised than me who do things all in order and it's all beautifully chronological. But if that's not your thing, you don't have to. So it just continued from there, and I found opportunities to draw. And once again, I really find that if I take the time to sit and draw or to sketch a scene, even if it's in a rushed way and it's not a great drawing at the end, I feel like I've experienced that time or that place in a deeper way. So I
Whereas,
say...
in this day and age of Instagram photos and
you'd snap a photo.
selfies and whatever, it's a wonderful way of keeping track of where you've been. Do any of those sketches then go on to be a big painting that you might do? You might look at that sketch and think, oh, wow, I'm going to make that into a big painting.
Occasionally. I think it's more something I can fit into my life that keeps me in touch with drawing. I do remember I did do a sketch that was sitting in the front of my car with acrylics in a sketchbook. So you don't have to sort of use the correct materials in sketchbooks, which did become a painting, and I did quite a few versions of it. But really it's about recording my memory and having a richer experience of the day. That's probably why I sketch. And I don't know that many of them will ever see the light of day. But I tell you, if you do take a trip somewhere, people are often happier to look at your sketches from that trip because there's less of them than to sit down and have to sit through 300 photographs, I suppose.
Or like in the old days, the slides. We'll have a slideshow and you think, oh my God, not again.
So it's a modern light version.
Yeah. But you paint interior murals in hospitals and business spaces and private homes. Can you sort of tell us a bit about these? How did you get into that?
Toowoomba is quite a lovely community, actually, and I was invited by the fellow who ran the Toowoomba Hospital Foundation at the time to come and repair a couple of murals that had been done at the hospital by an artist called Kendall Perkins, who now lives up at the Sunshine Coast. In a hilarious twist of fate, I now live in her house that she built in the early 2000s, I think, and it's a very artistic house. Yeah. But yes, I started by repairing some murals, and then he said, oh, could you, there's another job. And it was actually in the child protection unit. And it felt really important to, I took it quite seriously. I think I was pregnant at the time, but they needed murals that would distract children when they were in sort of having to be looked after after a child protection incident. So it felt worthy. As much of art can often be considered frippery in many ways, and even when you're trying to make time to make your own art, you're thinking, oh, is this a good way to be spending my time? Yes, it is, because there are so many ways art can help, whether it is.
And the joy it brings to people.
It is.
Absolutely.
And it's a conversation starter, and conversation is connection as well. So whatever you've drawn, if you get the opportunity to explain it or chat about it with someone, then you're making their life richer as well. It just goes on and on. So it started in that child protection unit and extended to other areas of the hospital. And then breast screen actually was connected to that. So I was doing murals that, and when I was first asked to do that, I thought, I pictured these like sirens, like the Australian artist Lindsay, Norman Lindsay sirens and these beautiful women in waterfalls. And they said you can paint anything except boobs.
Oh, really?
And I said, okay, because when you're having a mammogram, that's the last thing you want to be looking at. So it was like, oh, of course. Yes. It was once again a distraction thing. While you're having a mammogram, you can count the number of irises or the number of bees, or I was deliberately using it for that reason too. So I've been very lucky in that community to be able to do things like that.
I can imagine at the dentist, like when you're looking up and something on the wall there. But you said you also, you do love to paint for walls that kids can love, but also that adults can enjoy. So that must be, not challenging, but you've got to put some thought into that.
Trying to do styles that, because you don't, these people are working in these spaces every day, and you don't necessarily want to work in like a kid's room all the time. So yes, trying to bridge that.
And your art has been printed on wine labels, even fabric and banners. And I have got a gin bottle, which has got, actually I think we've got two gin bottles, one with a beautiful painting that you did and another bottle that Di did, which sit in pride of place on our cabinet. But yes, is that something you do commercially, or was that just for a charity?
That was actually just a lovely opportunity that came our way through a friend of a friend of a friend. I ended up being in the tasting rooms at the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers Food and Wine Festival, and I met the fellow who from Peachy Gin. He's a chemical engineer, actually. His family does these gin bottles, and they have started an art bottle collection.
Right.
So it had only started the year before, and I mentioned to him I'd love to be on your bottles, and he said, actually, we were thinking of contacting you, which was perfect. And I said it would also be a dream of my mother's to have her art on a gin label, because she was definitely a gin and tonic drinker. So as it came to pass, yes, I think places like these craft breweries and craft distilleries are looking for things that will differentiate themselves from other people and the products.
Yes.
So art is certainly able to do that. So it was a fabulous gig.
Yes.
We designed the gin.
Yep.
We had a tasting, and Mum decided that she'd like some apple and cinnamon and these lovely flavours in there as well. And then they did a pilot bottle, sent it to us,
Yes.
and as we drank it, we painted.
Oh, yes.
In our own homes.
Oh,
and
lovely.
then when we'd finished, we got together, and would you believe it, they look great together as well. So
They look terrific. Yeah,
yes.
they're really good. You're very obviously involved very much in the local community at Toowoomba, and art must play a big part in that. And there's some wonderful flower festivals, and the colours up there are just terrific.
Yes.
So you went to school there.
Went to school and then went away
Yes.
and came back again, as so many people do in Toowoomba.
Yes.
It's been a great place to raise kids, and there's, I guess, good schools there. But my business has been more global, so I've sort of taken. Sometimes I get absorbed in the local environment and the community things that are happening. I'm very involved with the Carnival of Flowers as a creative advisor to our parade.
Right.
It's in its 75th year this year, and so we speak to all of the volunteers who are creating floats for that parade. So it's a lovely artistic angle. It sort of brings, it's more creativity, I suppose, than visual art by itself. But yes, my business is more global, so I love the way I feel like I'm helping take Toowoomba to the world. Even New Year's Eve, I did a 3-hour just painting session with my club members, and there was a lady from Denmark who joined in.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was about midday, I think, over there, and I often have people from the US. During COVID, I did Saturday night drink and draws, just as a live Facebook post, and we had over 2,000 people join in that 8 weeks. It was incredible. Oh. One woman in New York was saying that she was basically spending the whole week crying because she was in a hotspot for COVID, and then this would come on, and while she was drawing, she wasn't crying. Oh. So once again, there's so many reasons for it.
So people set up their easels or whatever it is, and then they follow you online, and you tell them, give them ideas of what to do, and then can you see what they're painting, or they just can see obviously what you're painting? Yes,
I've almost done it every way. So with Zoom classes, I can get people to hold up what they've sketched or painted and see it then. Yes. Otherwise, they might put it in the comments of a Facebook Live, take a snap and share what they've done if they want to. There's lots of ways that I do it. My online club, I actually record the videos so people can watch it at whatever speed they want, actually. So the technology has given us so many options these days. But for those drink and draws during COVID, I would just say, yes, sort of grab a few things, pencil and paper, and off we'd go.
How terrific. Yep. And I could talk to you forever. And so we're going to get you back again, if that's all right, because I want to know what sort of school of art, that you admire the most. I want to talk to you about the exhibition Fairy Tales that's going on at Goma, and lots more we could talk to you, but sadly we're running out of time. But to follow Anna, go to Instagram, Shiny Happy Art, or shinyhappyartonline.com. She has the most amazing site, as I said, makes me want to become an artist, even though I can't, I'm absolutely useless. I have tried.
I'm a very good teacher, Rosemary.
But seeing the courses she runs, well, you just never know. So thank you, Anna Battle of Shiny Happy Art, for sharing a part of your life as an artist with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure our listeners, as I've said before, would love to have you back. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.